Well, hello, Southern Oregon, and welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm your host of the Real Estate Show. So happy you could join us again. I'm a broker here with John O. Scott Real Estate in Southern Oregon. And today we are going to be talking to Mr. Milan Hanson of Hanson Legal. He is an estate attorney. He does real estate. He also does wills, probate, and corporate. The reason we like having Mr. Milan on the show is to remind everybody of what happens if you don't have your ducks in a row and then there's an emergency. So he's going to remind us about wills, about trusts. Also, since Oregon is not a community property state, single folks that may not have everything written down, or you're in some kind of a partnership with somebody and don't have things written down, that is handled differently in Oregon than a lot of other states in the union. So he's going to remind us of how to take care of all that and also talk about some real estate legal issues. So it's a great show. It's always wonderful to have Milan on the show and remind us what we need to do legally so that if there is an emergency, things go a little bit more smoothly, because emergencies are never fun. And then you have legal problems on top of it, and then it's worse. So Milan Hanson joining us today. Before we get to that interview, I want to speak briefly about what happened in our local market this week. It was another topsy-turvy week in the world, but I do want to say that it looks like some of the interest rate increases are slowly being absorbed into our market. And what that means is we have a surprising high number of price reductions this week. And we also have a pretty healthy amount of back on market. That means people lost their escrow and they had to put their listing up for sale again. So just to give you an idea of what happened this week in Southern Oregon, and that's Jackson County and Josephine County combined is how I'm running these numbers today. We had 130 new listings. So in Jackson and Josephine counties, we had 130 new listings, but we had 33 back on market. Those are folks that lost their escrow and put it up for sale again. And then we had 158 price changes. So 158 people changed their prices to kind of accommodate for the changing market. So stay tuned for what happens next week. We'll have another report. In the meantime, before we get to our interview with Milan Hanson of Hanson Legal, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, John L. Scott, Ashland, and Medford, our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Guy Giles of Churchill Mortgage. We appreciate you so much helping us bring this show to the folks here in Southern Oregon every week. So we'll be right back with Milan Hanson. Don't touch that dial. Well, welcome back, Southern Oregon, to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here in beautiful Southern Oregon with John L. Scott Real Estate. And today I'm so excited to talk to one of my favorite people in the whole world, attorney Milan Hanson from Hanson Legal. Welcome back, Milan.
Hello. It's great to be back.
So you do a lot of estate law and also real estate law. And we had you on the show before, and it was really, really helpful. So we wanted to have you back and kind of bring people up to speed, not only about any changes that have happened in the last couple of years, but also just a good reminder about basic good estate practice and also good real estate practice.
Absolutely. And I could probably talk hours on these issues. And sometimes we'll mention a little a project or something. But I'll sometimes when real estate gets involved in the estate planning, you can cut it so many different ways. But people typically aren't just thinking about it. And if all I could do is just get people to think about it a little different and start asking some questions, I feel like I've done my job.
Well, and that is the most helpful thing, because a lot of people own homes and have not made any arrangements. And so before we got started, you were mentioning that you have some clients that are in that situation. They've recently come to talk to you about that. And it just sounds so typical of people not being ready. I wondered if you wanted to share some advice about how people, help them not wait to the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, just everyone's so busy. We're so busy. I mean, we feel like we live in this time when we have time savers, everything's convenient, but for some reason we just don't feel like we ever have time. There's, I'm going to get to it when, everything kind of comes together and I feel like I have a minute to breathe. And as my dad said, and he's been a real estate attorney here in Southern Oregon for over 40 years. He said, it's okay to have problems because the only day you're not going to have problems is the day that you're dead.
Oh, good grief.
But we keep thinking that there is all this time. And sometimes it is for my business clients, for my real estate investor clients, some of that planning comes now. If I can ever get people to do it early, keep it up to date. And I have a crystal ball on my desk. It's almost like just a joke piece because everybody wants to know what the future is. They said, we don't know. But the one thing I often see is that people keep thinking, I will have this one day where I'll be able to sit down and think about it. But life happens. And, as soon as you get a little extra money, then maybe you're thinking about your vacation. Maybe you're thinking about something else, but you sitting down, taking a look at what you have and like what's going to go where, and people are constantly negotiating themselves. I've seen real estate investors that say, well, I want to buy a house for my kid, or but they keep the title in their own name. And then I'd say, wait a second, okay, maybe your kid's paying you rent or something on that property, and you have this family deal. Maybe you want to loan money to your kid to buy their own home, or you put them in one of your units. And then the question is, hey, is this family deal? You got a bunch more kids. If something happens, there's nothing in writing that says that one house that maybe your kid's investing in, or maybe that they're like, hey, they're going to have this one unit, this one house, but then they build an ADU. They've invested another $100,000 of their own money in it. And there's nothing that says that house is definitively theirs. And if something were to go wrong, if they were to pass away, I sometimes have to tell the family, oh, wait, you have to move off this house. But wait, it was my house. And I said, well, I'm sorry, your name wasn't on title. And the estate plan says if you don't have a plan, the state of Oregon has one for you. And that is, we have to sell that home and then split that money up with all your brothers and sisters.
Oh my gosh. And so that is probably way more common than we realize. And it's not just adult children paying to be on the property. We have elders that are doing that on the adult children's property and not writing it down.
A lot of times the family deal. I mean, I've had big real estate developers come in here, and I've taken a look at their plans, but these side deals that they do with their family, and it's all done over a handshake. So it causes me anxiety on the back end. I love being an attorney. I love people telling if I can get people to pay attention, create a plan, but that plan, it has to be in writing. Because the one thing about estate planning is, if there comes a time where you're either in a hospital and we cannot ask you that question, or if you've passed away, or if maybe you're here and I just had a client this morning who was a real estate investor, and she had maybe 4 to 5 properties. Maybe there was another 6 that she'd kind of lost track of. And you think it's kind of crazy that people can lose track of their properties. And I see it happen. But so many of most of these estate planning issues, none of them are ever intentional. They just come with the best of intentions, but really not writing down what the plan is, not formalizing it. Because if and when something happens, that is when it's too late to do an emergency plan.
Right.
And sometimes people have a lot of ideas about how they want their investments to be used. Or here, we're passing it down to another generation. Are they going to be able to manage those properties? Sometimes the kids will just say, no, sorry, I'm in another state. I have my own job. I don't want to be a landlord. And they just want to sell all those properties as soon as the earliest opportunity they get, they probably will. But nobody ever talks really comes as a family and has that meeting. What's going to happen with the family's property? Whereas especially as we get older and we start to slow down, we have less energy, but we have these properties. What are we going to do? Well, you could go to a financial investor and they know how to manage money. But so often if you have properties and you're like, wait, I've been a landlord for 20 years and I don't need anybody. I don't need a property management company. I need somebody to go collect the rents and do the repairs. But starting to think about, hey, wait a second, if there's a change in your life, if you start to run out of energy, or sometimes we slip a little, and I've had a lot of people get to an age where they just say, hey, I love being a property investor. It's just a little much for me right now. How do we start to transition and shift?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you're dealing with people, how do you talk to them about making these plans? When I'm out helping people buy and sell houses, I always bring it up, but it's very hard to get them to actually make the phone call.
In there, I try to get as much education out there for free. And I have another 2-hour session called a family wealth planning session that people do with me. I have you fill out some homework, and that homework tells me about your family dynamics and about your assets and how they're titled. And sometimes people they drag their feet. They think that, hey, it's really tough. But wait a second. By the time you come into me and I do this family wealth planning session, I say it's $750. I will waive that fee if you do the work and you show up on time.
Wow, that is amazing.
So once we get it, because the first thing that'll happen, and it's so hard, everybody knows exactly what they have in their own minds. Oh, I know these 5 properties, or I know I have a bank account here, here, and here. But we're just trying to get it out of your head and onto paper. Mm-hmm. So then you can really interact with it. And sometimes people say, oh, hey, I have a tax preparer. Well, a lot of times the tax preparer, or they think that they have a bookkeeper or some CPA, it's really just doing the taxes. They're looking at the income that's coming in, but they sometimes aren't really seeing all the properties that you already have and how big your portfolio is of the stuff that you've already bought. Mm-hmm. So in that session, say, hey, let's take a look at it. And one of the big things, first of all, in doing that homework and just getting it outlined, what you have, I can see title issues. Sometimes I'll say, wait a second, hey, we have a property, spouse, the wife owns one property here. The husband owns another property over there. They don't own it jointly. They don't own it, or they own a property with one of their kids. Wait a second, do we own that, or do we have as much control over that piece of real estate as much as what oh no, really, that's mine. I'm the one that pays the mortgage. And I said, wait a second.
Yeah, that's mine.
Famous last words. In the legal world, I'm like, wait a second, no, these are other people untitled. They technically are owners.
Yeah.
How is that going to affect you? So getting back down to these handshake agreements, or one thing that you talked about, I think before we started recording, was having a partner, a lifelong partner. And somebody that you're unmarried to, maybe you're living with them, you're acting kind of like spouses. If something was to happen to you, I would tell you that person is a legal stranger. They're not entitled to anything. And if this goes through, if you don't do a plan, the state of Oregon's got a plan, your kids, maybe from another relationship, they're going to inherit. If something happens to you, that makes your partners living in your house a little less stable, because maybe they just assumed that they were going to be there until they were going to be in that house until they died as well. But taking a look at those title issues, their name is not on it. There's no estate plan in place that gives them any right to the place. And so many, I don't like cleaning up those issues after the fact, because by the time something's happened, I have to say, wait a second, now we got to get the other person off the property, and I have to get it sold so the kids can get their inheritance.
And that is so heartbreaking. We have that happen so often, and the other person frequently was surprised, like you just said, Milan. They thought they were going to get to have their end days there too. And it's hard on older people to suddenly be homeless.
It happens more often than you would think. or I have people that come in, they want to leave something for their partner, but they say, wait, I just want my partner to live in the house, but I want to keep the money, the value in the house. I want to keep that for my kids. And they are coming up with a plan that'll actually accomplish that. It has to be written down, because when you are not around to ask, we do not let any of the family members or your partner or anyone else to say, oh, they would have wanted this, or hey, they promised me that I could live in the house. Because usually those statements are so kind of self-serving. It's always, hey, the benefit was to me, this is what I was promised, or I was told this is what I would expect. But expectations could be the enemy of happiness, in that if those promises or those family agreements or those handshake deals, even with someone that we love and trust very closely, and I have to tell people, legally they are a stranger. They have no right to any of your property.
Yeah, that is just such a heartbreaking moment. So we're going to have to take a quick break. We're talking to Milan Hanson of Hanson Legal, discussing estate issues, real estate in general, investing. One of our favorite guests on the Real Estate Show. We'll be back after a quick word from our sponsors. We're brought to you by John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Guy Giles, Churchill Mortgage. We'll be right back. Well, hi again, folks. Alice Lema here, broker John L. Scott. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show. Milan Hanson is our guest today from Hanson Legal, and we're just getting an earful about what happens when you're not prepared for your estate and your real estate issues. Gosh, you were right before the break, Milan, you were talking a little bit about sometimes what happens to life partners when they don't write things down and there's real estate involved.
Yeah, just with, I think so many people, and I'll always say this, problems happen even with good intentions. That people expect something to happen and they assume that it's going to turn out okay, but they haven't even probed the question of what could happen. And every time I have someone come in, I say, hey, you're my client, not your partner, not your spouse, not your kids. And this would be nice to leave them something, but and this is another aspect about, it's so many real estate investors that I see that have 2, 6, sometimes 10 properties. Sometimes they're very, very like land rich, sometimes cash poor. I'm taking a look on the back end, like how have you been feeding your retirement accounts? How have you been feeding your actual finances? Do you have other more liquid investments that we can draw on? And many of the times when I'm taking a look and we don't have cash. And sometimes if I do this asset inventory with people and I say, wait a second, hey, look at all that you have. Hey, you got, I've told people, hey, congratulations. Did you know that you're a millionaire? They're like, what? Really, I am? And I'll say, yeah, I mean, very easily with 1 or 2 houses, you can get up. I mean, if the average median house, I mean, they're only 300,000, most likely 400,000 for a home. If you have 2 homes, you're you're creeping up to this million mark. And this million mark is kind of interesting because, I mean, first of all, we always talk about like the idea, the dream of becoming a millionaire. But now here in the year 2022, a millionaire is not quite what it meant 10, 20 years ago. Here, I mean, you have to be almost like to what we think of like as a millionaire would be like somewhere in between 5 million more.
Gotcha.
That's when you start to have like this amount of wealth that you're like, oh well, I'm well beyond this boundary. I'm well taken care of. I maybe have more than enough for myself in my own retirement. But even then, taking a look at those assets, are they in cash? Can we convert them to cash? Because sometimes people in estate planning, we're so focused on death. But death, hey, it's going to go to the next generation. Have we groomed that generation? Can they take over? Can they manage those properties? Are they going to have to sell it? What's going to happen to the family ranch? Is one kid going to get it? Oh, well, hey, my kids, well, they'll take it. And I say, wait a second. That's one piece of property. And you're assuming 3, 4 kids or something can manage that together. And it's like, no, that most likely they're not. They're going to have to sell it off, because they'll all have different competing ideas about what to do with that property, even though you wanted to keep it in the family.
Gotcha.
But so often I'm like, wait a second, even if we have a couple properties, I'm not thinking about what the kids are going to get. I mean, they're going to get taken care of. They can liquidate the properties and they can get their inheritance. Another bigger aspect is thinking about what's going to happen to you. I'm saying you're my client. And if you're entering a new stage of your life, and maybe a lot of people, they don't want to consider it. They don't want to look at their retirement. Maybe these properties were their retirement. But now that they're there, they're not thinking about how to turn it, this asset that maybe they've been having renters. They've had tenants pay their mortgage. Maybe their mortgages are paid off by now. Now this is just income to them. But maybe they've been managing the property. But they get a few thousand and hey, they've lived a comfortable life. But I'm like, wait a second, in this next stage of your life, are you really considering what you're going to need to live on so that you can remain in your own house? I have a discussion with people where we try to consider that maybe that uncomfortable part about getting older, and that is the part about it is that loss of control, that loss of independence, that loss is sometimes of mobility.
And being able to make your own decisions and just waiting too long.
If you wait too long, then I mean, so many realtors, so many other real estate investors say, I don't need an attorney until I need one. But too often it becomes like, hey, when you call because there's already a problem. I have to deal with how the table has been set. With the cards as they are given to me, there is almost little to no time to change. Or if we do have to do something, and this is sometimes thinking about what it will cost in your retirement, what will your healthcare costs be? They can be going up. And to even remain in your home, to have in-care home service, that can start to cost several thousands of dollars on top of what you were already using just for your own support and benefit. I mean, just for your income.
So in that scenario, I would think that you'd have to talk to people more often then, because as their condition deteriorates and healthcare costs go up, is it possible they just wouldn't have enough money?
Well, I have to tell people, and it's so hard at this point. It's like sometimes like looking at a kid and they have all their toys and they don't want to they have them all and they're hardly being able to hold on to anything or grab something new. They got all their toys and they don't want to let one go. But I was like, wait, it would be a little easier if you let something go. Maybe you sold that because then you'd have some money to start to fund your lifestyle, or even then to pay for some of your medical bills. And a hard part of it is I say, yes, you've spent this time building up this real estate portfolio. You've spent years, your blood, sweat, your tear. Sometimes maybe you weren't out there going out to bars, buying fancy cocktails. A lot of my clients have been scrimping and saving, and
their whole life.
Their whole life. And then they arrive, they're at retirement age, and they're still maintaining that scarcity mindset. And I say, wait a second, hey, look, you have about 2 million, you have about, in assets. This isn't the end of the world. You've done a good job. But how are we going to turn those assets into something that you can use so that you can start to wind down? You can start to slow down and approach that next phase of life with grace and without fear. Hey, you saved, you did it, but now we have to let something go. Because maybe during this time of scrimping and saving, paying these mortgages down, you haven't been taking this money, putting it in other. A lot of times when I'm talking to the financial advisors, stocks can be cleared out really quickly for money if it's needed. If there's a significant cost, you get a cancer diagnosis. Oh, wait, what's this going to cost? Sometimes if people don't have health insurance, sometimes they sacrificed health insurance so they could wait a second, but I bought more houses. If you don't have that, thinking about how we can start to fund your retirement. And I have so many people, maybe they're at this point and they haven't spent any money on themselves. And I say, wait, it's great. We'd like it to go to your kids, but you have your blood, sweat, and tears have gone into building this portfolio your whole life. You can go have fun. I mean, it'd be nice to give it to your kids, but it's your money. Spend it. And whatever it is for your quality, for the quality of your life is the most important thing. And as that's changing, some people absolutely don't want to admit that we're getting older. And I'll say, hey, maybe you think I'm a young guy. I am right there behind everybody else. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to blink and I'm going to blink, be in my 50s, blink. I'm going to be in my 60s, blink. Oh, hi, I'm 70. Where am I? And we're sometimes going through life responding to everything that's coming up. And we're doing it to the best of our abilities, but sometimes we aren't thinking. We have a long range plan, but we haven't quite finalized it. What property we want to go to which kid, if somebody's living in our house, a partner, maybe a kid, how's that going to affect them? And have we, like, even by letting somebody live with us, have we created this expectation that they're going to be having a comfortable place to live for the rest of their lives?
And not everybody is set up to manage real estate. A lot of real estate investors think, oh, well, this kid will take care of it, or that person will take care of it. They don't really have the skill. They didn't spend the lifetime growing that part of themselves. So
absolutely. That is another, I mean, even I just had a client this morning, had 2 daughters, and it was a very, very hard conversation, is that, she didn't think that her daughters would be good at stepping up. And I say, hey, they're going to get taken care of, but I'm really worried about my client. What's going to happen to you? I want you to be taken care of. And if you slow down, that somebody's going to be there writing the checks to make sure that your bills are paid, even when you might not be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really good advice. So let me ask you, in the few minutes we have left in this segment, people that are younger, that are just starting, maybe they just bought their first house, but they're not married. And I'm not being political or anything here, folks. It's just that Oregon, like you like to say, Milan, Oregon has a plan if you don't. And sometimes unmarried people don't realize that. Can we speak briefly to that scenario?
In Oregon,
together,
we do not have what's called common law marriage. So no matter if you are living with someone, they're your partner, in your mind, you kind of are married. We're not going to assume that you are, because you have to go through that. You have to make that promise. And I just got married last weekend. So I'm 1 week into it, and I've already updated my estate plan to make sure that, but it's becoming more and more popular for different reasons. It doesn't, sometimes people have already been married before. They just say, hey, I can love you, but I don't want to, I don't need to do that. I don't want to fully make that legal commitment. And maybe they think that doesn't mean anything. Hey, as long as I'm living with you, we're in love, we're fine. And that's good. The problem is that person is still considered to be a legal stranger. They have no right to inherit from you. They have no right to make decisions for you. If you go into a hospital, the doctor will say, hey, what's your spouse? And you could maybe say this person, but they're like, wait a second, you're not married to them. The doctor will be like, well, I'm sorry, you're not a family member. We're not going to talk to you.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking too.
So getting those, you can absolutely get your wishes, put them onto paper. And now all of a sudden, now you have a piece of paper that says, oh, this person is in charge, or they get this. If you don't have a plan, these default rules in Oregon are that your stuff could pass to a family member, bloodline, usually by your bloodlines. And I often see problems with stepkids. Stepkids can get disinherited very, very quickly, and sometimes unintentionally.
Oh, no.
I had some kids come in. I say kids, I mean, they're in their 40s and 50s. Their parents their dad had passed away 6 years ago, and he had about $3 million of properties. And they had a stepmother, and their stepmother inherited everything by rights of survivorship on the deeds.
Oh boy.
And they didn't realize that when their stepmother passed away, they weren't going to get, wait, our stepmom passed. Both our parents have passed. Our stepmom never had kids of her own. We're the only kids that she's ever had. And I had to explain to them that they weren't going to inherit as stepkids.
Oh, man.
They weren't in the bloodline.
Well, we've got another quick break coming. I'm so sorry. This is so interesting. Milan Hanson will be back in just a quick second. Hold that thought. Don't touch that channel. Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show. Alice Lema here, broker John L. Scott, talking to Milan Hanson of Hanson Legal, not Milan Legal, Hanson Legal. And we were just having a really interesting conversation about what happens to stepchildren, step parents when somebody dies, real estate scenarios. Finish your thought on that one story you were telling us, because it sounded heartbreaking.
I love being a lawyer. I love giving people advice, especially if there's something we can prevent. But when something happens, if nobody came forward, I hate being the bearer of bad news that this is the law or this is what we are. This is the state and we can't get out of it. Well, what if we just change? Sorry, the opportunity for planning has gone out the window. And in this particularly sad case, I mean, there's a bunch of variations I see of it. These kids had $3 million of property that their dad had built up, a real estate portfolio over his lifetime, and they got disinherited, maybe even by accident. Nobody talked about it. Nobody had done anything.
Oh dear.
And it's been scrambling to try to figure out what to do. But sometimes it's the first person that brings the person, whether you are the partner or whether you are the kid, bringing your parent in or your partner into the attorney to come up with a plan, because sometimes you're taking something at face value. Hey, you've said that you got something. It won't matter. What you think you have will not exist by the time the law kicks in and we're like, wait a second, are you going to inherit? So just taking a look at that, taking a look at the title issues, how you own your property. If you have property in a bunch of states, I'll always tell people, hey, trust is going to be more important for multi-state issues. Just because we would have to go through probate in every single state where there is property.
Oh, wow. Wow, that sounds burdensome. Oh my gosh.
But how many of these things just so many real estate investors aren't considering? I mean, they're trying to look for the next deal, the next property to buy. How are they going to buy it? But wait a second, what are you building all this for? What are you building? I mean, if you haven't contemplated how you're going to spend that money for yourself and fund your own retirement, and I want to know, how are you going to be taken care of through your health? Whether it waxes and wanes, and there's going to be a point where it may be at a low point, and you might not be able to manage those problems. Who's going to keep paying your bills?
That's what I was wondering, because a lot of older real estate investors surprisingly don't have a plan. I'm always shocked. They were so good at acquiring all these properties and keep them going. So what happens if you have a real estate investor and they're not married and they get dementia and they don't have money for their care? If they haven't written anything down, how does the family sell anything off to take care of them? How does that work?
Well, at that point, and I have a lot of clients that are they're somewhere at the early stages of dementia. And so the legal determination for, we call it capacity, and say, hey, can this person, do they have enough brain cells? Do they to actually make an estate plan? In the legal standards, very low. If you have a lucid moment, you're in it, and I have to ask these two questions. Do you know what you own? And do you know where you want it to go? And if they say, oh, I have this property, this property, this property, this property, I say, okay, great. Because sometimes even if you have dementia, you could be forgetting the names of your kids, but you know your properties. You're like, yeah, that caused me a lot of grief. I had a tenant there, and then I had this problem. Sometimes that is it's funny, even with dementia, the way it affects us. And you can know what you have. And I have had people absolutely forget what property they own. And I'm like, wait a second, we're coming in a little late. We've identified the property, and I say, okay, this is good. Are you having a moment now? Hey, yeah, I'm good. So I catch them while they're in this office. They know what they have and where they want it to go. We can do an estate plan.
What if they can't? Then
if
what
they
happens?
can't,
Yeah.
we are absolutely in a whole other world. There is something called guardianship and conservatorship. And if you're at a point where you don't have a plan, and there's nobody as a backup and designated, because we live in the United States of America, we very much care about our individual rights, our ownership rights, our property rights. We do not take that lightly. You can be crazy, that's fine. Hey, craziness is just a part of the human condition. By it's almost by what flavor you are. But if you want your wishes and to be respected, you have to write them down in the proper way. That's estate planning. If you don't, now we have this process, guardianship and conservatorship, where someone, and typically it'll be the hospital. The hospital say, hey, we can't release this person.
Oh.
They can't make decisions on their own anymore. And we had another attorney in our office that he would be getting calls from the hospital for emergency guardianship conservatorships.
Oh,
the person would be, they'd have to release them, say, hey, we want to get you out of the hospital, you're stabilized. But we don't think you're able to make your own decisions. This is a court process, and sometimes the court will initiate it. They'll have a person come forward and say, hey, they'll send out a court visitor. And this is a psychologist that'll interview the person that is going through this process and to see, hey, are you able to manage? And they're a psychologist, even if they have a lucid moment and they speak really well, they can kind of pry into that and say, well, yeah, but they kind of missed a few things, or yeah, after an hour, they ended up repeating themselves and they almost forgot who I was.
Oh.
There is this process. We're going to try to find somebody we strip your rights away to make decisions for yourself, and we grant it to another person, a guardian or a conservator. Conservator is typically dealing with the money, and a guardian is going to be there to make the decisions, your day-to-day decisions on where you're going to live. And as so many people are aging alone, and even if you have a partner, you're technically still aging alone. This legal partner, it's not a legal partner, because your partner, regardless of how close that relationship is, and they may be cooking and cleaning for you, they have no access to your bank accounts. And we don't know if they're actually going to be managing that money to your benefit, versus are they going to take that money and be so scared and want to remain in the home that they don't make any decisions because they're like, wait, you're going to stay here with me because I don't want to spend that money down or have to sell this house to fund your fund your
Wow. Those are hard life decisions at a time when it's not, there's no good solution because it wasn't spoken about ahead of time.
We try that. Oh. That is maybe some of the worst case scenario. Maybe some of the kids come forward and say they want to be a guardian or a conservator, but if, hey, they weren't interested or in managing your properties before, or they live in another state, they have their own life, they have their own family to take care of, they might not be interested in coming back and helping you. And then this is where there are professional guardianships and conservators.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that can actually be really helpful to a family. In the couple of minutes we have left, and we're definitely going to have you on. We have so much more to talk about. Let's go back to that 2-hour planning block you were talking about. What kind of questions get asked, how people can get a hold of you and start getting this process going.
Yeah, it's called the Family Wealth Planning Session. I really ask people to tell me about their family dynamics. Tell me about the assets they own. And sometimes people want to keep it close to the chest. And some people are very, very private, even with me as an attorney. And I say, wait a second, I got confidentiality. I'm not just Joe Schmo here. I can't go shout to the world what you have. But sometimes by keeping it close to the chest, by the more it's really a control piece, because at some point we will have to relinquish control. And if we do that, this is where we can lose property. This is where property goes to the state of Oregon is lost and unclaimed. And just last year, $80 million went to the Oregon and lost unclaimed property. They have over 600 million, like over $500 million. And so I know that we're losing some. I know that we're missing pieces. Well, because if you don't get a person to put it out on paper ahead of time, so the planning is very, very effective in that.
So Milan Hanson from Hanson Legal, wealth of information. Thank you so much. We'll have you again on soon. See you next week, folks.